one thing that I want all of you to know is I learn a tremendous amount from TikTok. In fact, and I'm going to make this statement, and in 5 years, if I'm right, I'll remind you. If I'm wrong, you'll have forgotten. So I win either way. I think we're going to see books go obsolete. I don't think that sitting down and reading 200 or 300 pages where 40, 50, 60% of that is filler anyway, I don't think that's the path forward as it relates to synthesizing ideas and learning. And I was I have curated my TikTok feed, one, to be things that I can send to Josh Anderson, basically just to give him a hard time. There's a tremendous amount of that. And he'll attest to this, that about once a week, he gets a really great TikTok from me telling him how I feel about him. But the rest of it is a very curated experience. And I was listening to this woman talk who's a financial coach. And I took her idea and I expounded on it. And that's what I'm going to do with you right now. But here's what I want you to do. Operations Rainmaker agent on a team. Take out a sheet of paper if you don't have one already, and I want you to answer this question. You may not know the exact answer, but do your best. In the last 12 months, how much money have you made? Now, Rainmakers, I'm talking net, okay? For the rest of you, most of the money you make is net. So how much money did you make in the last 12 months? Now, I'm going to ask this question twice, and I'm going to ask it slowly, okay? So whatever you wrote down, and let's just say that you wrote down $150,000, okay? What are the 2 to 3 moves that you need to make that would take your annual and make it your monthly? So the question I just asked you is what your annual income was, right? And if you said $150,000, what are the 2 to 3 moves that you need to make that would take your annual $150,000 and make it your monthly? Now, there's a couple of ways that you could do this. One is a really fun way, right? So like, imagine that now you're asking the question, how do I earn $150,000 a month? And this goes back to an old coaching exercise that, sometimes I forget about exercises that work really well. Another question that I like to ask people, and I've asked many of you this before, is what has made you successful in the past that you have since stopped doing? And this kind of mindset that I'm about to walk you through is definitely one of mine. This is something that has helped so many people in the past. And for whatever reason, I just stopped doing it. But the question is, if you look at a challenge you have, right? Let's just say maybe you need to take 10 listings a month. How would you solve that challenge of 10 listings a month if the goal was 10 times bigger? So what you do, and again, this is meant to be fun. It's not meant to be stressful. But if your goal is to take 100 listings instead of 10, what would your plan look like? And all I'm attempting to do is just stretch the limits of your financial thermostat, stretch the limits of your pre-programmed thinking. And the second part of this that I want you to understand is that when it comes to making your annual your monthly, you have to kind of inventory what your resources are, because ultimately, and some of you will love this statement, some of you are going to hate it, you are paid in direct correlation to the value that you bring. You are paid to the direct correlation, or in a direct correlation to the value that you bring. So if you're making 150 G's a year, that's the value you bring to the marketplace. Now, this is the upside and the downside of capitalism, because some of you might argue, like my sister, for example, she's a teacher. She works at the lowest income high school in the state, and she makes $50,000 a year. Is that fair? No, it's not. But when I look at, and I don't like saying this to her, but the value that she brings to people in a capitalistic society is not really worth all that much. And not from the perspective of helping people build and design a life. I understand that music is important, but when it comes to people going out into the wilderness of the economy and building something that is of value, that's not something that really helps people. And you are going to be directly paid to the extent of the value that you add. So when you think about what are the resources that help you provide value? What are the resources that help you provide value? So some of that is going to be knowledge, right? What you know. Some of that's going to be your experience. So think of experience as just knowledge that you've tested. Some of that is going to be your time. And then some of that is going to be the skill that you've developed. But when you think about the value you bring, you're probably going to find most of it in those 4 areas. And here's what I've found so interesting about people is that as it relates to getting better, you're either going to trade your time or you're going to trade your money, and you will always pay with what you value least. So I value time over money. So if I want to learn something new, I don't want to invest 10, 20, 50, 60 hours into learning. I don't want to hike that learning curve. So I'll pay somebody $5,000 or $10,000 to teach it to me. So you're always going to pay with what you value least. But what I want you to hear, especially in you live inside of 3 ecosystems minimum. You live inside of the ecosystem of your team, your organization. You live inside of the ecosystem of the real estate industry, and you live inside of the ecosystem of Keller Williams Realty. And there isn't a person here that this isn't possible. You can figure out a way to make your annual your monthly. The thing is that it's going to require a process, and you're probably going to have to ask yourself that question 10, 20, 30, 50 times before the answer truly reveals itself. And then once the answer reveals itself, that's when the work begins. You have to go through the process of providing the value that is ultimately worth whatever it is that you want in the marketplace. So I trust that this is helpful to all of you. And all I intended to do here was to help you expand your thinking around your role. And there were a couple of key questions. One is, how do we take your annual and make that your monthly? Number 2, what are the things that have made you successful in the past that you have since stopped doing? And then what are the resources that you have that you can utilize, that you can deploy to ultimately increase the value that you bring to the marketplace? And remember, you're always going to pay with what you value least, your time or your money. So I trust that we'll have some spirited conversations around this on your coaching calls this week. I trust that I'm going to see all of you on the live expert interview with Jason Khalifa and the mastermind. Be on the lookout today for the text that will have the link for you to submit your questions. And it is a pleasure being in business with all of you. Let's go make this a kick-ass week, and I'll talk to you all next week. Bye-bye.